What happens when a woman walks into a room full of men who believe she doesn't belong there? What happens when those men are elite military trainees, hardened by years of believing that strength comes only in one form? And what happens when that woman carries within her the discipline forged in the crucible of Navy SEAL training? Sarah Martinez had faced bullets in Afghanistan, survived months of the most brutal military training known to mankind, and earned her place among America's most elite warriors. But nothing had prepared her for the wall of silence that greeted her when she stepped into the private training facility that Tuesday morning. The air was thick with testosterone, sweat, and doubt. 47 sets of eyes turned toward her, each gaze carrying the same unspoken question. What is she doing here? They were about to find out that sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. They were about to discover that true strength isn't always what it appears to be, and they were about to learn that when you underestimate someone who has survived hell itself, you're in for the education of a lifetime. This is the story of how one woman turned a room full of skeptics into believers, how she transformed doubt into respect, and how the principles that kept her alive in combat would save not just her reputation but the lives of everyone in that room. Sarah Martinez adjusted the straps of her gear bag as she stood outside the imposing steel doors of Elite Tactical Training Solutions. The facility looked like a fortress, all concrete walls and reinforced windows, tucked away in the industrial district of San Diego. At 28 years old, she had seen enough military installations to know that this place meant business. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot filled with pickup trucks, motorcycles, and SUVs that screamed masculinity and aggression. She had earned her place here through merit, not charity. After completing one of the most grueling selection processes in military history, surviving 3 deployments in Afghanistan, and earning commendations that most soldiers only dreamed of, Sarah had transitioned to civilian life 6 months ago. The adjustment hadn't been easy. Civilian jobs felt meaningless after years of life-and-death decisions. Corporate meetings seemed like child's play compared to planning missions in hostile territory. When the opportunity came to join this elite training program for private security contractors, Sarah jumped at it. The pay was excellent, the work would be challenging, and she would be back in an environment where her skills mattered. The only catch was that she would be the first woman ever admitted to the program. The heavy doors opened with a mechanical hiss, and Sarah stepped into a world designed to break people. The training hall stretched before her like an aircraft hangar, filled with obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and equipment that looked like it belonged in a torture chamber. The air smelled of gun oil, rubber mats, and determination. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everything look more intimidating than it already was. 47 men were scattered throughout the space, some stretching, others checking equipment. A few gathered in small groups talking in low voices. The conversation died as soon as they noticed her. Sarah had expected this moment, had prepared for it mentally, but the weight of their collective stare was still overwhelming. She recognized the look in their eyes because she had seen it before, in mess halls, briefing rooms, and training grounds around the world. Some of the men tried to hide their surprise, busying themselves with unnecessary tasks. Others stared openly, their faces displaying everything from curiosity to outright hostility. A few whispered to their companions, probably making bets about how long she would last. Sarah had heard it all before. The difference was that this time she wasn't backed by military regulations and equal opportunity policies. This was the private sector, where old-fashioned attitudes died hard. The lead instructor, a mountain of a man named Derek Kowalski, emerged from a side office. He had the look of someone who had seen combat and lived to tell about it, with scars on his forearms and the kind of confidence that came from surviving situations where weakness meant death. His grey hair was cut military short, and his eyes held the calculating intelligence of a professional warrior. Derek approached Sarah with measured steps, his expression neutral but his body language radiating authority. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how this first interaction would play out. Sarah straightened her posture and met his gaze directly, neither challenging nor submissive, but ready. "Martinez," Derek said, consulting a clipboard. His voice was gravelly, worn down by years of shouting orders over gunfire. Former Navy SEAL, 3 combat deployments, specialized in reconnaissance and direct action. Impressive resume. "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady and professional. She had learned long ago not to let emotion creep into her voice during these crucial first moments. Everything about this interaction would be analyzed and discussed by every man in the room. Derek studied her for a long moment, his eyes taking in her gear, her posture, her readiness. Sarah knew he was looking for signs of weakness, for any indication that she might not belong here. She had been through this evaluation before, countless times, and she understood that she would have to prove herself, not once, but over and over again. The program is 12 weeks, Derek continued, his voice carrying across the now silent training hall. We'll cover everything from close protection to hostage rescue, from urban warfare to survival training. The washout rate is 60% for men. I've never trained a woman before, so I don't have statistics for that. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt the weight of representing not just herself, but every woman who might want to follow in her footsteps. It was a burden she had carried before, but it never got easier. The knowledge that her failure would be used to justify keeping the doors closed to others added pressure that had nothing to do with personal ambition. I understand, sir, Sarah said. I'm here to earn my place, just like everyone else. Derek nodded slowly, then turned to address the room. Listen up, he barked, and every conversation stopped instantly. This is Sarah Martinez. She's here for the same reason you are, to become the best at what we do. She's proven herself in real combat situations, which is more than most of you can say. Anyone who has a problem with that can walk out now and save us all some time. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could feel the tension in the room, could sense the unspoken conversations happening through glances and subtle expressions. Some of the men looked genuinely curious, perhaps even impressed by Derek's introduction. Others maintained their skeptical expressions, clearly reserving judgment. A few seemed openly hostile, their body language suggesting they viewed her presence as an insult to their profession. One man, tall and lean with the bearing of former special operations, stepped forward slightly. His name tag read Phillips, and his cold blue eyes fixed on Sarah with unmistakable challenge. With respect, sir, he said, his southern accent thick with barely concealed disdain, some of us have concerns about unit cohesion. This kind of training requires absolute trust, and introducing variables that haven't been tested in this environment could compromise everyone's safety. Sarah had to admire the man's skill at wrapping sexism in legitimate-sounding military jargon. She had heard variations of this argument throughout her career, and she knew that responding defensively would only confirm their preconceptions. Instead, she remained silent, allowing Derek to handle the challenge. Derek's expression hardened. Phillips, isn't it? Former Army Ranger? When the man nodded, Derek continued, Then you should understand that the enemy doesn't care about your comfort level. You'll work with whoever the mission requires, and you'll do it professionally. If you can't handle that, there's the door. The exchange created ripples of tension throughout the room. Sarah could see alliances forming, lines being drawn. Some men nodded in approval of Derek's stance, while others seemed to side with Phillips's concerns. She realized that this was more than just about her presence. It was about the fundamental question of change in a traditionally male-dominated field. The first day's training began with physical assessments. Sarah had maintained her fitness religiously since leaving the military, understanding that her physical capabilities would be scrutinized more than anyone else's. The tests were designed to push everyone to their limits: obstacle courses, endurance runs, strength challenges that would have broken civilian athletes. As they moved through the exercises, Sarah found herself in a strange position. She needed to perform well enough to earn respect, but not so well that she made enemies by outshining the men who expected to dominate. It was a delicate balance, one that she had learned to navigate during her military career, but that still required careful attention.
During the obstacle course, she found herself running alongside a shorter, stockier man named Rodriguez.
He was struggling with the rope climb, his face red with exertion and embarrassment. Without thinking, Sarah positioned herself to provide encouragement, sharing techniques that had helped her master similar challenges during SEAL training. Keep your legs tight around the rope, she called out, demonstrating the proper technique. Use your legs to push up, not just your arms. Rodriguez followed her advice and successfully completed the climb. When he reached the top, he flashed her a grateful smile that was worth more than a dozen official commendations. It was her first small victory in winning over the group, proof that her knowledge and experience could benefit everyone. But not everyone was impressed by her collaborative approach. During the marksmanship portion of the assessment, Phillips made a point of questioning her weapons handling, suggesting that her military training might not translate to civilian security work. His comments were technically professional, but the underlying message was clear. She didn't belong here. Sarah responded by demonstrating shooting skills that silenced the range. Her groupings were tight, her transitions smooth, her weapons handling flawless. She had learned to shoot in environments where missing meant dying, and that education showed. By the end of the exercise, Even Phillips had to acknowledge her competence, though he did so grudgingly. The day continued with tactical exercises, medical training, and briefings on security protocols. With each passing hour, Sarah could feel the dynamics in the room shifting slightly. Some of the initial hostility was giving way to grudging respect, but she knew she was still being tested in ways that her male counterparts weren't. During lunch breaks, she overheard conversations that confirmed her suspicions. Groups of men discussed her performance in terms they would never use for each other. They debated whether she was tough enough for the program, whether her presence would create distractions, whether clients would accept female protection agents. Every aspect of her participation was analyzed through the lens of gender rather than capability. The afternoon brought scenario-based training that would test not just physical skills, but judgment and leadership under pressure. Derek announced that they would be running protection details for simulated VIPs, with different team members rotating through leadership roles. It was the kind of exercise where reputation could be made or destroyed based on split-second decisions. Sarah found herself assigned to a team with 5 men, including Rodriguez, who had warmed up to her after the morning's rope-climbing assistance, and Phillips, who remained openly skeptical of her abilities. The scenario involved protecting a mock businessman during a restaurant meeting, with multiple potential threats and limited resources. As they studied the floor plan and discussed their approach, Sarah could feel the group's dynamics at work. The men naturally looked to Phillips for leadership, despite the fact that no formal leader had been designated. His military bearing and obvious confidence made him the default choice, and Sarah understood that challenging this assumption would be risky. Instead, she focused on contributing valuable insights based on her combat experience. When Phillips outlined a protection formation that left blind spots in their coverage, Sarah quietly suggested modifications that would address the vulnerabilities. When they discussed communication protocols, she shared lessons learned from real-world operations where coordination had meant the difference between success and disaster. Gradually, the team began to appreciate her contributions. Rodriguez openly supported her suggestions, and even some of Phillips' allies began to nod in agreement with her tactical assessments. But Phillips himself remained resistant, viewing her input as challenges to his authority rather than valuable additions to their planning. The scenario itself was designed to test every aspect of their training. The mock VIP was played by an instructor who deliberately made poor decisions, wandering away from his protection detail and ignoring security protocols. Multiple role players acted as potential threats, from aggressive journalists to armed attackers. The team had to adapt constantly to changing circumstances while maintaining their primary mission of keeping their principals safe. Sarah's moment came when their carefully planned formation was disrupted by a simulated attack. 2 gunmen burst into the restaurant, and the team had to respond instantly. Phillips, as the assumed leader, began barking orders, but his commands were based on textbook responses rather than the specific reality of their situation. Sarah saw immediately that his approach would leave their principal exposed. Acting on instincts honed by real combat experience, she moved to shield the VIP while simultaneously coordinating with Rodriguez to establish a more effective defensive position. Her actions weren't about seizing control, they were about saving lives, and everyone in the room could see the difference. The scenario ended with their principal safe and the threats neutralized, but the real victory was more subtle. Sarah had demonstrated leadership under pressure without undermining team cohesion. She had shown that her instincts and training could benefit everyone, not just herself. Most importantly, she had proven that she belonged in this environment not because of any special treatment, but because of her genuine competence. As the group debriefed their performance, Derek made observations that carried weight beyond the specific exercise. He praised the team's adaptability and specifically noted how Sarah's real-world experience had contributed to their success. His words carried extra significance because they came from someone whose opinion mattered to every person in the room. The first day ended with equipment maintenance and preparation for the next day's training. As Sarah cleaned her weapons and organized her gear, she reflected on the small victories and ongoing challenges. She had survived the initial test and even gained some allies, but she knew that the real work was just beginning. The ride back to her apartment gave her time to process the day's events. She had walked into that training hall knowing she would face skepticism and hostility, but the reality had still been emotionally draining. Every action had been scrutinized, every word analyzed for hidden meanings. She had to be better than good. She had to be undeniably excellent. But as challenging as the day had been, Sarah felt a familiar satisfaction. She was back in an environment where her skills mattered, where the training had real-world applications, where she could make a difference. The path ahead would be difficult, but she had faced worse odds and emerged stronger. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself, and new chances to change minds. She had taken the first step in a journey that would test everything she had learned about leadership, perseverance, and the true meaning of strength. The men in that training hall had seen just a glimpse of what Navy SEAL discipline could accomplish. Soon, they would understand the full power of what she brought to their world. 3 weeks into the program, the training had intensified beyond anything most of the men had experienced in their military careers. Sarah had found her rhythm, earning grudging respect from some participants while maintaining an uneasy truce with others. The daily challenges had become a battlefield where she fought not just against the curriculum, but against preconceptions that seemed as stubborn as mountain stone. The training facility had become her second home, a place where she arrived before dawn and left after dark. Every morning brought new tests of endurance, skill, and mental toughness. Sarah had adapted to the unspoken rules of this masculine environment, understanding that she needed to be twice as prepared and 3 times as resilient as anyone else to maintain her position. Derek had structured the program to simulate real-world conditions that private security contractors faced around the globe. Urban warfare scenarios in mock cities built within the facility tested their ability to navigate hostile environments while protecting clients. Hostage rescue simulations pushed their tactical skills to the limit. Survival exercises in the nearby desert challenged their physical and mental endurance when everything went wrong. Sarah excelled in these challenges, drawing on experiences that most of her classmates couldn't match. Her 3 combat deployments had taught her lessons that couldn't be replicated in training scenarios, no matter how realistic. She had learned to make life-and-death decisions under pressure, to lead when leadership meant survival, and to maintain focus when chaos threatened to overwhelm rational thought. But her success created new problems. Phillips had assembled a core group of followers who viewed her achievements as threats to their own standing. They whispered about special treatment, suggested that scenarios were modified to favor her capabilities, and questioned whether her military record was as impressive as claimed. The rumors were subtle but persistent, designed to undermine her credibility without providing targets for direct confrontation. The situation came to a head during week 4, when Derek announced a major field exercise that would test everything they had learned. The scenario involved a multi-day mission in an abandoned industrial complex 30 miles east of San Diego. Teams would be responsible for planning and executing a complex operation involving hostage rescue, route clearance, and safe evacuation under simulated enemy fire. This exercise will determine who continues in the program and who goes home, Derek announced to the assembled group. You'll be evaluated not just on individual performance, but on how well you function as part of a cohesive unit. Leadership will rotate among team members, and everyone will have the opportunity to prove their capabilities. End. Get Bob to Kirkas. Sarah felt the familiar tightening in her stomach that preceded major operations. This exercise would be different from the daily training routines. With program completion hanging in the balance, every participant would be pushed to their absolute limits. More importantly, the men who had been waiting for her to fail would finally have their opportunity to prove their point. Teams were assigned randomly, a decision that Sarah initially viewed as fortunate. She found herself grouped with 6 men whose attitudes toward her ranged from neutral acceptance to mild support. Rodriguez was part of her team, which provided at least one definite ally. 2 others, Jackson and Chen, had worked well with her during previous exercises. The remaining 3 were unknowns, men who had maintained professional but distant relationships throughout the program. Phillips ended up on a different team, but his influence extended beyond his immediate group. Sarah could see him working the room during the planning phase, visiting other teams and engaging in conversations that stopped whenever she approached. His message was subtle but clear. This was the opportunity to prove that diversity in elite tactical units was a luxury they couldn't afford. The exercise began before dawn on a Monday morning. 7 teams loaded into transport vehicles for the drive to the abandoned industrial complex. The facility had once been a chemical processing plant, closed down years earlier due to environmental concerns. Derek and his instructors had transformed it into a tactical playground, complete with simulated civilians, role-playing enemies, and hazards designed to test every skill they had developed. Sarah's team was assigned the most complex scenario: rescue 3 hostages from different locations within the facility while dealing with multiple enemy positions and improvised explosive devices. The mission required precise coordination, expert marksmanship, and the kind of tactical flexibility that separated professional operators from weekend warriors. During the initial planning session, Sarah found herself in an unexpected position. The team looked to her for leadership, not because of gender politics, but because her combat experience clearly surpassed anyone else's in the group. Rodriguez voiced what others were thinking. Martinez has done this for real. We'd be stupid not to listen to her. The Sarah accepted the leadership role carefully, understanding that success would validate her place in the program, while failure would be used as evidence that women couldn't handle the pressure of command. She approached the planning methodically, drawing on lessons learned in Afghanistan, where mistakes meant body bags rather than poor grades. "The key is coordination," she explained to her team as they studied floor plans and intelligence reports. "We can't afford to have anyone freelancing or trying to be heroes. Each of you has specific responsibilities, and the mission succeeds only if everyone executes their part perfectly." Her approach emphasized thorough preparation and clear communication. She assigned roles based on individual strengths rather than seniority or ego, making decisions that prioritized mission success over personal relationships. Jackson, who had proven himself an exceptional marksman, would provide overwatch from an elevated position. Chen, with his background in explosive ordnance disposal, would handle the IED threats. Rodriguez would coordinate with simulated civilians to minimize collateral damage. The other teams were pursuing their own scenarios simultaneously, creating a complex environment where multiple operations unfolded in the same space. Sarah could hear gunfire and explosions echoing through the facility as other groups engaged their targets. The cacophony added realism to the exercise while creating additional stress for participants who needed to distinguish between their immediate threats and background noise. Sarah's team moved through their mission with precision that impressed even the evaluating instructors. Each phase unfolded according to plan, with team members adapting smoothly to unexpected developments. When they encountered a simulated wounded civilian during the second hostage rescue, Sarah made the quick decision to modify their approach, demonstrating the kind of tactical flexibility that separated good operators from great ones. But the real test came when everything started going wrong. During the final phase of their mission, a series of equipment failures and scenario modifications created a crisis that threatened to derail their operation. Communications went down, cutting off coordination between team elements. Simulated enemy reinforcements arrived ahead of schedule, forcing them to defend positions they had planned to evacuate. Most critically, one of the hostages suffered a medical emergency that required immediate attention while under fire. Sarah found herself facing the kind of decision that haunted military leaders: choose between mission objectives and human lives. The scenario was designed to test judgment under pressure, but she knew that her choice would be analyzed through lenses that had nothing to do with tactical considerations. Drawing on experiences that still gave her nightmares, Sarah made the call that defined real leadership. She directed Jackson to maintain overwatch while Chen and Rodriguez dealt with the medical emergency. She personally led the assault on the enemy position that threatened the wounded hostage, using aggressive tactics that neutralized the threat but exposed her to significant risk. The decision saved the simulated hostage but complicated their extraction timeline. Sarah had to completely reorganize their approach, adapting to new circumstances while maintaining mission focus. Her team responded with the kind of trust that only came from confidence in their leader's abilities. They followed her modified plan without question, executing complex maneuvers under pressure that would have challenged seasoned professionals. The mission concluded successfully, but Sarah knew that the real evaluation was just beginning. During the immediate aftermath, she could see Derek and other instructors reviewing footage and comparing notes. Their expressions were carefully neutral, but she caught glimpses of discussions that seemed more intense than usual. The debriefing session revealed the complexity of what they had accomplished. Derek outlined the multiple challenges that had been thrown at each team, explaining how the scenarios had been designed to test decision-making under pressure. When he reached Sarah's team, his analysis was thorough and professional. Martinez faced a choice between mission objectives and humanitarian considerations. Derek explained to the assembled group. Her decision to prioritize the wounded hostage required tactical flexibility and personal courage. More importantly, her team executed her modified plan flawlessly because they trusted her judgment. The praise was welcome, but Sarah could see that not everyone in the room was convinced. Phillips and his supporters maintained skeptical expressions, their body language suggesting that they viewed her success as somehow illegitimate. She realized that no amount of demonstrated competence would satisfy these critics. They were invested in her failure regardless of evidence to the contrary. The tension came to a head during the evening meal, as teams gathered to discuss their experiences and prepare for the next day's challenges. Phillips approached Sarah directly for the first time since the exercise began. His manner was superficially professional, but his words carried unmistakable hostility. "Interesting choices out there today, Martinez," he said, his southern accent thicker than usual. "Some of us are wondering if your emotional response to that medical situation might have compromised the mission objectives. In the real world, that kind of hesitation could get people killed." Sarah felt every conversation in the room pause as participants sensed the confrontation building. She had been expecting this moment, had prepared for it mentally, but the reality was still challenging. Phillips was skilled at using legitimate military concepts to mask personal prejudice, making it difficult to respond without appearing defensive.
I disagree, Sarah replied evenly, maintaining eye contact without escalating the confrontation. The medical situation required immediate response.
Leaving a wounded individual to die would have compromised our security situation and violated the protection protocols we're here to learn. Phillips smiled coldly.
Easy to say now, but combat decisions can't be made based on feelings. Sometimes you have to accept losses to accomplish the mission.
That's the kind of hard choice that separates professionals from amateurs. The challenge was clear, and Sarah understood that her response would define her standing with the group. Some of the men were watching with obvious interest, curious to see how she would handle direct confrontation. Others seemed uncomfortable with Phillips's approach, but unwilling to intervene. Rodriguez started to step forward, ready to defend Sarah's decisions, but she subtly signaled him to stay back. This was her fight, and it needed to be resolved on her terms.
Phillips,
she said, her voice carrying the authority she had learned in combat situations where respect meant survival. I've made those hard choices in real combat situations where people actually died. The difference between simulation and reality is that in the real world, you live with the consequences of your decisions for the rest of your life. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. Every person I've lost in combat teaches me something about leadership. Every decision that saves lives validates the principles I've learned through experience that you can't get from textbooks or training scenarios. If you want to question my judgment, I suggest you first get some experience making life and death decisions when bullets are actually flying. The room fell silent. Sarah had taken a significant risk by responding so directly, but Phillips had pushed the confrontation beyond the point where diplomacy was possible. She could see surprise in some faces, approval in others, and calculation in Phillips's expression as he processed her response.
Derek's voice cut through the tension.
That's enough, he said firmly, approaching the group with the bearing of someone accustomed to stopping conflicts before they escalated. We're here to train professionals, not to resolve personal differences. Phillips, Martinez, both of you need to remember that mission success depends on unit cohesion. The immediate confrontation ended, but Sarah knew that nothing had been resolved. If anything, her direct response had probably intensified Phillips's determination to see her fail. She had defended herself successfully, but the cost might be continued conflict that could undermine the team dynamics essential for program completion. The next 3 days of the exercise brought challenges that tested every participant to their breaking point. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, and constant pressure created conditions that revealed character in ways that normal circumstances never could. Sarah found herself functioning on the edge of human endurance, drawing on reserves of strength and determination that she had discovered during SEAL training years earlier. Her team continued to perform excellently, but the broader group dynamics were deteriorating. Phillips's influence was creating divisions that threatened everyone's success. Some participants were choosing sides based on loyalty rather than objective assessment of capabilities. The collaborative spirit that had characterized the early training was giving way to competition that bordered on sabotage. Derek and his instructors were clearly aware of the situation, but they seemed to view it as part of the training itself. Real-world operations often involve personality conflicts and leadership challenges. Learning to function effectively despite interpersonal tensions was itself a valuable skill for private security contractors who would work with diverse teams in high-stress environments. Sarah realized that her response to this situation would determine not just her own fate, but the future opportunities for other women who might want to enter this field. She needed to find a way to succeed without compromising her principles or allowing the conflict to destroy the program's objectives. The answer came during a night navigation exercise when everything fell apart simultaneously. Multiple teams became lost in the desert terrain surrounding the industrial complex. Radio communications failed due to equipment malfunctions and user error. Several participants suffered injuries that required medical attention in darkness with limited supplies. Sarah found herself leading a rescue mission that brought together members from different teams, including some of Phillips' strongest supporters. The crisis forced everyone to focus on survival rather than politics. Her navigation skills, medical training, and experience in emergency situations became essential for everyone's safety. Working through the night, Sarah coordinated search teams, established communication protocols, and organized medical care for injured participants. Her leadership was focused entirely on mission success rather than personal vindication, but the effect was more powerful than any direct confrontation could have achieved. By dawn, all missing participants had been located and evacuated safely. Injuries had been treated effectively, and the exercise had been concluded without serious incident. More importantly, Sarah had demonstrated leadership qualities that transcended gender or politics.
She had proven that competence and character mattered more than preconceptions or prejudice. The final debriefing session included honest assessments of what had gone wrong and what had gone right during the exercise.
Derek's analysis was thorough and fair, acknowledging both individual achievements and team dynamics that had affected overall performance. When he addressed the leadership during the night rescue, his words carried weight that resonated throughout the room.
"Leadership under pressure reveals character," Derek said, looking directly at Sarah. "Last night, Martinez demonstrated the qualities we're trying to develop in all participants. Clear thinking under stress, ability to coordinate diverse teams, and focus on mission success rather than personal advancement.
Those are the attributes that define professional operators." Philip said nothing during the debriefing, but his expression suggested that the events of the exercise had forced him to reconsider his position. Some of his supporters seemed similarly affected, their attitudes towards Sarah noticeably different from the hostility they had displayed earlier. Sarah understood that she had achieved something more significant than individual success. She had proven that excellence transcended the boundaries that others tried to impose. More importantly, she had done so in a way that elevated everyone rather than diminishing anyone else's achievements. The return journey to the training facility was marked by conversations that would have been impossible weeks earlier. Men who had questioned her presence were now asking about her military experiences, seeking insights that could improve their own performance. The barriers were breaking down, replaced by professional respect based on demonstrated competence. But Sarah knew that the real test was still ahead. The exercise had been a turning point, but the program continued for 8 more weeks. She had proven she belonged in this environment, but maintaining that position would require continued excellence and the wisdom to handle success as gracefully as she had handled skepticism. 8 weeks after the desert exercise, the atmosphere in the training facility had transformed completely. What began as a hostile environment where Sarah fought daily battles for basic respect had evolved into something resembling genuine camaraderie. The men who once questioned her every decision now sought her input on complex tactical problems. Even Phillips had grudgingly acknowledged her competence, though their relationship remained professionally distant. Sarah had established herself as more than just a participant in the program. She had become an unofficial mentor to younger members who struggled with the demanding curriculum. Her combination of real-world experience and patient teaching style made her someone others turned to when the pressure became overwhelming. She found satisfaction in helping Rodriguez master advanced marksmanship techniques and watching Chen develop the confidence to take leadership roles during scenario training. But success brought new challenges. As word of the program's first female participant spread through the private security community, external pressure began building. Some potential clients expressed concerns about female protection agents, questioning whether their presence might create complications in certain cultural environments. Industry publications ran articles debating the wisdom of gender integration in high-risk security work. Derek maintained his professional support, but Sarah could see him fielding phone calls that left him frustrated and defensive. The company's reputation was built on producing the most elite operators available for civilian hire. Any perception that they were compromising standards for social engineering purposes could damage their credibility in a competitive marketplace. The situation came to a critical point when Marcus Webb, CEO of Web Security Solutions and one of the industry's most influential figures, announced his intention to observe the program's final exercise personally. Webb controlled contracts worth millions of dollars, and his assessment could make or break careers throughout the security industry. His visit would determine not just Sarah's future, but the future of gender integration in elite tactical training. Webb is old school, Derek explained to Sarah during a private meeting in his office. He built his reputation during the early days of private security when the work was exclusively male. He's not necessarily opposed to change, but he'll need to see clear evidence that integration doesn't compromise operational effectiveness. Sarah understood the implications. Webb's evaluation would carry weight far beyond this single program. A negative assessment could close doors for future female applicants and validate arguments that women didn't belong in elite security roles. The pressure was intense, but it was also familiar. She had been carrying the burden of representation throughout her military career. The final exercise was designed to be the ultimate test of everything participants had learned. Teams would plan and execute a complex operation involving multiple phases: intelligence gathering, target surveillance, assault coordination, and extraction under hostile conditions. The scenario simulated a hostage rescue in an urban environment, where civilians, friendly forces, and enemy combatants were intermixed in ways that made every decision critical. Webb arrived the morning of the exercise, bringing with him a reputation that commanded immediate attention from everyone involved. He was a compact man in his late 50s, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. His presence added a layer of tension that was palpable throughout the facility. During the pre-exercise briefing, Webb positioned himself where he could observe everything while remaining unobtrusive. Sarah caught him studying her during Derek's presentation, his expression neutral but his attention focused. She realized that she would be under intense scrutiny from the moment the exercise began until its conclusion. The teams were given 12 hours to complete their missions, with evaluations based on tactical effectiveness, adherence to rules of engagement, and protection of innocent civilians.
Points would be deducted for unnecessary risks, collateral damage, or failure to adapt to changing circumstances. The scoring system was designed to reward careful planning and flawless execution rather than aggressive tactics that might succeed but cause unacceptable consequences. Sarah found herself assigned as team leader for the final exercise, a position that carried both honor and enormous pressure. Her team included some of the program's top performers, men who had proven their capabilities throughout 12 weeks of intensive training. Rodriguez was her second in command, with Jackson providing sniper support and Chen handling technical challenges involving surveillance and communications. The target building was a 6-story structure in downtown San Diego that had been temporarily converted into a tactical training site. Multiple floors contained hostages guarded by role-playing enemy forces, while civilian actors moved through the building following scripts designed to create realistic complications. Sarah's team needed to identify hostage locations, neutralize threats, and extract the civilians without causing casualties that would be unacceptable in real-world operations. Webb established himself in a command center where he could monitor all team communications and observe live video feeds from throughout the building. His presence transformed what would normally be a training exercise into something approaching a job interview with life-changing consequences. Sarah began by conducting detailed reconnaissance that revealed the complexity of their challenge. The building's layout created multiple choke points where small units could be trapped and overwhelmed. Enemy positions were carefully chosen to maximize defensive advantages while minimizing options for attacking forces. The hostages were located in positions that made rescue attempts extremely risky without perfect coordination. "This isn't going to be a quick in-and-out operation," Sarah explained to her team during their planning session. "We need to be patient, methodical, and absolutely precise. One mistake could get hostages killed and ruin everything we've worked toward." Her approach emphasized intelligence gathering over aggressive action. While other teams seemed focused on speed and dramatic assaults, Sarah's group spent hours developing detailed knowledge of enemy positions, civilian patterns, and building vulnerabilities. Her military experience had taught her that successful operations were won through preparation rather than heroics. The tactical plan she developed was sophisticated but flexible, allowing for adaptation as circumstances changed. Each team member had primary and secondary roles, with backup procedures for various contingencies. Communications protocols were established to maintain coordination even if equipment failed or team members were separated. As the exercise began, Sarah could feel Webb's attention like a physical weight. Every decision would be analyzed and compared against industry standards that had been established by men working in male-dominated environments. She needed to prove that her approach could succeed without compromising the aggressive effectiveness that clients expected from elite security teams. The initial phase involved infiltrating the building and establishing overwatch positions that would support the rescue operation. Sarah's team moved with precision that reflected weeks of intensive training, each member executing their assigned tasks flawlessly. Jackson reached his sniper position without detection, Chen established communications nodes that would maintain contact throughout the building, and Rodriguez coordinated with surveillance elements to track enemy movements. But the exercise quickly became more complicated than anyone anticipated. The role-playing enemy forces had been instructed to employ tactics that reflected real-world threats Sarah's team might face in international operations. They used civilians as human shields, employed improvised explosive devices to deny access to certain areas, and coordinated their responses in ways that challenged every tactical assumption. Sarah found herself adapting continuously to developments that threatened to derail their carefully planned operation. When enemy forces moved hostages to new locations, she reorganized her approach without losing sight of the mission objectives. When communications were jammed during a critical phase, she implemented backup protocols that maintained team coordination. Most importantly,
When faced with a situation where aggressive tactics might succeed but risked civilian casualties, she chose patience over expediency. The decision that defined the exercise came when Sarah's team located the primary hostage, but discovered that rescue would require passing through a corridor where enemy forces had positioned civilian shields. Traditional tactical doctrine suggested overwhelming force to neutralize the threat quickly, but Sarah recognized that such an approach would result in unacceptable collateral damage. Instead, she implemented a complex maneuver that required precise timing and extraordinary trust between team members. Jackson would provide distraction from his overwatch position, while Chen created electronic disruptions that confused enemy communications. Rodriguez would lead a flanking movement that positioned friendly forces behind enemy lines, while Sarah personally negotiated the approach that would extract the hostage without endangering innocent civilians. The plan required coordination that bordered on the impossible, but Sarah's team executed it with precision that impressed even the evaluating instructors. Each phase unfolded exactly as planned, with team members adapting smoothly to minor complications that arose during implementation. The hostage was extracted safely, civilian casualties were avoided, and enemy forces were neutralized through tactics that emphasized skill over brute force. Webb observed the entire operation from the command center, his expression revealing nothing about his assessment of what he was witnessing. Sarah could see him taking notes and engaging in quiet conversations with Derek, but she couldn't determine whether his conclusions were positive or negative. The uncertainty added stress to an already intense situation, but she maintained focus on mission completion rather than external evaluation. The exercise concluded with all hostages rescued and minimal casualties among both civilian and friendly forces. Sarah's team had achieved objectives that other groups accomplished through methods that resulted in significantly higher collateral damage. Their approach took longer and required more complex coordination, but the results validated tactics that prioritized precision over aggression. During the immediate debriefing, Derek's analysis was thorough and professional. He outlined the challenges each team had faced and evaluated their responses against real-world standards that private security contractors were expected to meet. When he reached Sarah's team, his assessment was detailed and overwhelmingly positive. Martinez demonstrated leadership qualities that distinguish exceptional operators from merely competent ones, Derek explained to the assembled group. Her team's approach prioritized mission success while minimizing risks to innocent civilians. In the private security industry, that balance between effectiveness and responsibility often determines whether clients trust you with their most important assets. Webb said nothing during the formal debriefing, but Sarah caught him studying her with the calculating intelligence of someone making important business decisions. She realized that his final assessment would determine not just her immediate future, but the broader question of whether the industry was ready to embrace the capabilities that women could bring to elite tactical operations. The private meeting between Sarah, Derek, and Webb took place the following morning in a conference room that felt more like a corporate boardroom than a military briefing area. Webb's presence transformed the space into something approaching a job interview. But Sarah approached the conversation with the confidence that came from proven performance under pressure. "Miss Martinez," Webb began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected entire organizations. "I came here with significant skepticism about the wisdom of gender integration in elite tactical training. The industry has functioned effectively for decades with traditional approaches, and change always carries risks." Sarah remained silent, understanding that Webb was building toward conclusions that had been shaped by his observations of the previous day's exercise. His tone was neutral but serious, suggesting that his final assessment would be based on objective analysis rather than personal prejudice. "However," Webb continued, "your performance yesterday demonstrated capabilities that transcend gender considerations. Your tactical approach showed sophisticated understanding of complex operational requirements. More importantly, your leadership under pressure revealed qualities that any client would value in high-stakes protection scenarios." The praise was welcome, but Sarah sensed that Webb's assessment was more complex than simple approval. He was evaluating not just individual performance, but the broader implications of policy changes that could affect the entire industry. "The question," Webb said, leaning forward slightly, "is whether your success represents individual excellence or proof that broader integration can work without compromising operational effectiveness. Client confidence depends on consistency and predictability. They need to know that every operator meets the same high standards regardless of background or demographic characteristics." Sarah understood the challenge implicit in his statement. Her success had proven that women could perform effectively in elite tactical roles. But the industry needed evidence that such performance could be replicated consistently.
She was not just representing herself, she was establishing standards that future female applicants would be measured against. Mr.
Webb, Sarah replied, choosing her words carefully. My military experience taught me that excellence comes from preparation, dedication, and the willingness to learn from every situation. Those qualities aren't determined by gender. They're developed through training and tested through experience. The industry benefits when it draws talent from the widest possible pool of qualified candidates. Webb nodded slowly, his expression suggesting that her response aligned with conclusions he had reached independently. Derek has offered you a position with his advanced training cadre, he said. That role would involve developing curriculum for future programs and mentoring new candidates. Are you interested in that opportunity? Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. The offer represented validation of everything she had worked toward. But more importantly, it created opportunities for other women who might want to follow similar paths. Her success could become a foundation for broader change rather than an isolated exception.
Yes, sir, Sarah replied.
I'm very interested in helping to develop the next generation of elite operators, regardless of their backgrounds. Webb's final assessment shaped not just Sarah's career, but industry attitudes toward gender integration in elite tactical training. His endorsement carried weight that opened doors throughout the private security community, creating opportunities that had been closed to women for decades. Client concerns about female operators gradually gave way to recognition that competence mattered more than demographics. Sarah's new role as an instructor allowed her to influence the training of hundreds of future operators. She developed curriculum that emphasized the tactical skills and leadership qualities essential for success in high-stakes protection scenarios. Her teaching style combined technical expertise with the patient mentoring that helped struggling candidates overcome challenges that might otherwise end their careers. The program's success created a ripple effect throughout the industry. Other training organizations began recruiting qualified women for their programs, understanding that talent and dedication were the most important criteria for elite tactical roles. Client attitudes evolved as they witnessed the professional capabilities that diverse teams could bring to complex operational challenges. Rodriguez became one of Sarah's first success stories as an instructor, completing the program with distinction and establishing himself as a sought-after protection specialist. Jackson and Chen went on to leadership roles in major security firms, carrying with them lessons learned about teamwork and professional respect that transcended traditional boundaries. Even Phillips eventually acknowledged the value of Sarah's contributions, though their relationship remained professionally cordial rather than personally warm. His evolution from skeptic to grudging ally illustrated the broader transformation that the industry experienced as performance-based standards replaced traditional assumptions about capability and leadership. 5 years later, Sarah reflected on her journey from reluctant outsider to respected industry leader. The training hall that once felt hostile had become a place where she shaped the careers of men and women who would protect clients in some of the world's most dangerous environments. Her success had proven that excellence knew no gender boundaries, and her influence had created opportunities that would benefit future generations of tactical professionals. The transformation wasn't just about individual achievement. It represented a fundamental shift in how the industry defined competence and leadership. Sarah's story became proof that true strength came not from conforming to existing expectations, but from the courage to challenge limitations and the persistence to prove that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources. The power of Navy SEAL discipline had been demonstrated not through domination or aggression, but through the quiet competence that earned respect and created lasting change. Sarah's journey from skepticism to acceptance to leadership showed that the most powerful victories were won not by defeating others, but by elevating everyone to higher standards of performance and professionalism. Her legacy extended far beyond the training programs she developed or the candidates she mentored. Sarah had proven that diversity strengthened rather than weakened elite tactical teams, that different perspectives enhanced rather than compromised operational effectiveness, and that the industry's future lay in embracing talent wherever it emerged, rather than limiting opportunities based on outdated assumptions about capability and character.